I'm now going to show you how to create a crosstab query, which shows you how to aggregate the data by two sets of values, one displayed in the rows and one displayed in the columns. So you're going to go to the query design and you're going to click on the crosstab in the design tab right here. You'll need to have at least one variable for the rows, one variable for the columns, and one variable for the values. And if you don't have that, then it's not going to allow you to create the crosstab query. So if you look across this bottom row, you can see that one of the variables was designated as the row heading, one is the column, and one is the value. All right, so let's take a look. We're going to use this time the credit risk database. So you'll want to have that available from the in-class exercise files. And we are going to go into the query design and we are going to create a crosstab query by job and gender. And for those intersections, we are going to show the average savings by job and gender. All right, so let's take a look in Access. All right, so I'm going to go to the query design and I'm going to use the credit risk table. And I'm going to pull down the field job and the field gender and savings. And I need to tell Access that we're going to do a crosstab query. So if you see up here across the top, I'm going to choose crosstab. And as I mentioned, we have to have a row, a column, and a value. So notice when I click in this box, when this field, the drop-down arrow occurs, and that is going to be my row. Jobs will be in the row, and then gender is going to be my column. So when I click here, the drop-down occurs. That'll be the column. And savings is actually going to be my value. So we're grouping by job and gender, so I'm going to leave the group by as is under this totals row. But for savings, I'm going to designate that as my value. And it is the average. Okay, and so we'll designate that as the value. And that's all we need to do. We'll run the query. And now you can see I have the average savings for females and males for the various types of jobs. All right, and I'm going to save this. And we are going to name it QRY savings by job and gender. Okay, just click that, and there we go. All right, and now we're going to do some additional crosstab queries. We're going to do a crosstab query to explore the question, which are the more risky customers, the married, divorced, or single individuals? So we're going to look at average savings by credit risk and marital status this time. And again, you'll notice that we have designated a variable for our row heading, our column heading, and then our value. So credit risk is the row heading, marital status is the column heading, and then savings is what we're calling our value variable, and we are going to use, on this time, we're going to use the average savings. So let's go back into Access, and I'm going to create a new query, and I want now, and let me remind myself how I did this, credit risk and marital status. So I want credit risk marital status. I want savings again. I want this to be a crosstab query, so I'm going to click crosstab up at the top. And I'm going to leave these as group by. These are my grouping variable. Credit risk category and marital status, those are my grouping variables. I want this to be my row heading, and I want this to be my column heading. I want to look at average savings. So this is actually, I'm going to start with average here, and this is the value. And as I mentioned, we have to have a row heading, a column heading, and a value, or Access is not going to like this very much. So let's run the query. Okay, and so now you can see we have the savings for the different credit risk categories for all of the different marital types. And to save this, I'm just going to click Action, force me to save it, and I'm going to name it QRY credit risk by marital status. And the query, and I'm going to modify it just a bit. Instead of looking at the average savings, I just want to see the count of people in these categories. So I'm going to leave this as credit risk by marital status. I'm going to go to the design view, and I want to leave all of this alone, credit risk by marital status. But over here for savings, if I want to see the count of people, I can just change this average to a count. And I don't necessarily have to do this on the savings variable. It doesn't, really matter which variable I use. It's just going to count the number of observations, really. The fact that I have grouped this by credit risk and marital status is the most important point, and it's just going to count how many observations it sees in savings. So it's not really looking at the value of savings at all. And therefore, savings as the field here is not really essential. I could almost put any field here and I would get the same result. So let's just go ahead and run it. And you'll see that I have now the counts of individuals in the credit risk category and the marital category. Let's just go ahead and change that field for savings. I just want you to see that the fact that we have savings here is not critical at all. I could even change this just to gender and run it again. And I have the exact same results. So my point being, it's just counting the rows for which there is some value in the field gender or savings in those two examples. So you can play around a little bit with that and just again note that when we're using this count feature, this field that is selected is not super important. Now, if I changed it to average or sum or max or min, then of course I'd get different results. Okay, so let's go back to this result. Let me run it again. And maybe we want to do a little analysis on who appears to be the riskiest group. And we could just take these results and pop them into Excel. So I'm going to go into Excel. And I'm going to paste these. It might be just a little bit easier to work with in Excel. Let's get rid of this. Oops. And it's hard to look at these counts and make any conclusions. So I'd like to get some percentages. And I'm going to just get rid of all these observations. I'm just creating a little template here to put my results in. And now I'm just going to take these values and calculate some percentages. So I'm going to say equals B2 divided by the sum of the values in B. And I can just copy and paste this all the way across now. Copy it all across the whole table. Okay, and that will do it for me. I'm going to change this to a percent though to make it a little easier to read. And so all I did is I just took each of these values and divided it by the sum of the column. And that's how I got these percentages. So for the divorced group, 58% are high risk, 42 are low risk. For the married group, 47% are high risk and 53% are low risk. And for the single people, 44 are high risk and 56 are low risk. And so we could conclude from looking at this that from the divorce group, we have a majority in the high risk category, whereas for the married and single group, the majority are in the low risk category. So those results suggest that the divorce group is the riskier group.